Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where guests share their powerful personal stories of transformation through human design. I'm Kathy Bochonko, an intuitive human design mentor and guide to radical self-trust. Join us as we explore how your human design experiment can truly change your life. Hi there. So my guest today is Richard Corbett, a 6'2" emotional manifesting generator, left angle cross of healing. And I had the huge pleasure of meeting Richard in person this September. And it's just really a great thing to be in aura with this man. And so I'm very excited to bring him in whatever form you're getting him, whether this is podcast or YouTube, but really a beautiful human being and lots of wisdom and experience that just oozes. Like when you stand next to this man, you just feel love, right? Like, they say that the generator type aura is enveloping, right? And I felt that quality in your aura so much standing next to you, to the point where it's like, oh, can I just stand here? So just to let you know a little bit about this wonderful man that we're going to talk to today, he is a professional human design analyst, astrologer, and teacher with over 25 years of experience, specializing in integrating human design, astrology, and self-awareness into practical applications. He guides individuals and couples on transformative journeys. Richard utilizes his emotional authority to navigate decision-making with clarity and depth, facilitating emotional and energetic restoration through personalized coaching workshops and long-term educational programs such as Living Your Design, Rave ABCs, and Rave Cartography. His work with Emerge by Design, his commitment to relational mastery and self-empowerment has established him as a respected mentor in the human design community. And you might also recall, if you listened to my episode a couple weeks ago with Brandy Jordan, she refers to him as her beloved. So to give this some context. And I'm very excited to have you join me. And I'd love for you to just say hello. And if the boat doesn't rock too much, just dive right into your story.
You bet, Kathy. What a great pleasure to be with you. I felt the same connection when we met in Denver. I was just like, wow, I want to hang out with this person. So wonderful to be with you today. And yeah, I am joining you from our sailboat that Brandy and I live on. We're in the Sea of Cortez. We're at anchor right now. And you probably can't tell from the screen, but we are getting thrown. I'm kind of holding on to the table while I'm talking to you. So a little added level of difficulty, I guess. But
I think you're in perfect flow with the boat. Yeah, so when it moves, like it all just stabilizes just fine.
And the sailboat life is wonderful for keeping you present to the moment. It's just an amazing adventure and experience we're on. So anyway, it's a thrill to be able to join you from our home in the Sea of Cortez. But thank you so much for having me here today. Yeah, it's really, really wonderful to see you. And I guess my story, wow, it's been a while ago that I met the human design system. A little context, I was originally from Kentucky, where I grew up. I joined the military after I left school. I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years. I got out of that wild adventure and went on a trek around the world for 3 or 4 years, and eventually found myself living back in the States in Taos, New Mexico, where I've been in that area between Taos and Santa Fe for the last 25 years now. So that has been my home until this recent relocation to Mexico right now.
Now, I saw on your birth chart that you were born in Florida.
I was born in Florida. Yeah, I was born in Florida, but I only spent a short time there before relocating with my parents. Okay. Yeah, but I do have a Fort Lauderdale birth information. Yeah.
Born on spring break.
Been in New Mexico. No, yeah. So when I got into to New Mexico, I was about 27 years old, 28 years old, and I was going through just coming up on my Saturn return. Now, I didn't know what that meant back then. I didn't know about astrology, but at that stage of my life, I was going through huge transition. After all the military and the traveling the world, I was looking for work, and between relationship and home and so many things, I was going through a lot of transition and really challenged by it. I was having a hard time. Well, at any rate, one of my friends said, "Hey, I met this guy. He has something called Human Design System. You should talk to him." And I was like, "Hey, I'm happy for any advice. Let's check it out." And that's how I got my first reading in 1999 from a man named Ed Stanton, who was one of Ra's original students. Not many of your listeners may have heard of Ed because sadly he passed away in the early 2000s. If he was still around, and I wish he was, everybody would know Ed. He was a magnificent teacher, spent a tremendous amount of time with Ra back when Ra was first getting this information out. So I got my reading, and like many people, I was like, whoa, whoa. Like, how do
this was pre your first Saturn return, or was it
I was
after?
pretty much right. I was right at the Saturn return when I met Human Design. So I was just going up on the roof. I'm a 6'2", as you said, profile. And so I was making that transition onto the roof, of course, at that moment, not having any idea without the information, but was part of that transition. So I was immediately enthralled with the system, with my reading. And so I started training with Ed right away. I was like, we became fast friends. And so right away began taking classes from him one-on-one. You know, this is pre-internet. It was so long ago, you know, and I remember those early years with Ed. I knew I had something powerful in my hands, and no one had heard of it, you know, for those first, 8 or 9 years before the internet took off. It was like I felt like I was carrying around gold in my pocket, and I just wanted to share it with anybody that wanted to listen. I was like, this is an amazing tool for self-awareness.
What was it that stood out to you the most? I mean, I know that was a long time ago, but when you first were told this, it was so bizarre compared to anything that we knew about, right?
Yeah. Oh,
what
absolutely.
was it that really spoke to you?
Well, the part about my inner authority, which is the solar plexus, my emotional authority, it just struck me. I always thought everybody else was so emotional. This whole idea of waiting, as a manifesting generator, and I also have the channel of transitoriness, 3536. So it's the solar plexus to the throat, and it's all unconscious, and both gates are line 3. So it's a very trial and error life. And so I was always go, 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 and no thinking, no waiting involved. Like I thought, do more, do it now. So the whole concept of strategy was so shocking to me. And this idea of waiting for my wave and all that went into that, that's what really hooked me. I was like, wow, this is the opposite I have been approaching my life. I have an undefined ego center. So I thought proving myself was the way to do things, a big goal setter and those kind of things. So
you have that hanging gate 21 on your undefined ego center. That's my husband. And I know what that's like a lot.
Yes, I have my personality moon there, which is a fairly emotional planet in this gate of control, right? So again, just the shocking nature of a different perspective on my life, it really, really landed in me. And so anyway, that's how I got into it. And so during that period, I started studying right away. This is before the IHDS school that Ra eventually created in the early 2000s. This was before that. So the only way to learn about human design was to meet one of his students somewhere in the world, right? Ra spent a lot of time in New Mexico in the early 90s, not long after the transmission that he received. He got a group going in Taos, New Mexico. So it was one of the first places that it was shared. And so just by good fortune of living there and meeting this man is how I met it. And so I said, training with him, and I was able to become an analyst a couple of years later. Again, the only certification process was you meet with a student, you go through all the classes with that person, and then you send in a recording and then they, if you pass or not. So
this was 1999.
Yeah, and I was certified in 2000.
Okay, so this was all after, because I know type didn't even exist until like 97, wasn't it? Right.
So it was right when all that was coming out.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was all very new, and it was just when I think about those early years, I guess just when I'm talking about from say 2000 to about 2008, it was I knew that someday we'd be where we are today. I thought, this information is so empowering. It will grow. It will happen. And so it's so wild to be 30 years down the road now and seeing what's happened across the globe with human design. It's just been fascinating to watch. But in those early days, I remember being rather lonely, not having a lot of people anybody other than Ed to talk to about it. And so, yeah, that's why I'm so engaged with helping new people now, when they come into human design. And I love support groups. I love your podcast. I mean, these are wonderful support tools people have that we didn't used to have not long ago. So
Yeah.
it's really fun.
So you took human design with you up on the roof.
Yeah, I sure did. I did. And at the time, I also started a new career. In addition to studying and learning and being a professional analyst, I was giving readings right out of the gate. But I also worked in corporate America. I was a corporate sales manager as well. So I was bringing human design into the corporate world, which also was a bit of a lonely experience. I would tell my employees, hey, if you like this, if you don't, no problem, but I do need your birth time. And so, but it was really fun to work with human design in a business setting so long ago, and to see the impact it could have on many different levels, of course. So that's kind of took me through my first 10 years in human design. Okay, then I had at that point, I was coming up on my Uranus opposition, which I also at that time didn't know a whole lot about. And I went through some more struggles. I had some life limitations that came about, and it was pretty devastating. I was going through really, really take you to the mat life experiences. And I was really questioning my life. I was questioning human design. I was like, wait a minute, I've been following strategy. I've been living with my authority. Like, I couldn't understand from my body graph how I could be having such traumatic experiences. It was a real dark night of the soul situation. And what happened at that point is I met another person who was an astrologer. And I went to see this astrologer, and he told me things about the planets that blew me away. It really, at that time, sort of saved my life to understand what was happening with the frequencies. And at that time, in 2008 to 2010, that's when Pluto, the planet of transformation, was squaring Uranus, the planet of shock. Now, on a global scale, that's when we went through the Great Recession. Some people may remember that. It was a very tumultuous time across the world. And that aspect in the sky was landing right on my incarnation cross. And not to get too technical to your listeners, but I was being tremendously impacted by this particular transit, and I wasn't able to really decipher that from my body graph. And that's how I got into astrology. Made it through that transition, made it through the Uranus opposition. And from that moment on, I was working with human design and astrology. And that's been my passion ever since. And the other thing that happened, I'll add to my story at that point, right about that same period is when I met Genoa Bliven, who was also one of Ra's original students. And he was running Human Design America, which is the American affiliate of the IHDS school. And I started becoming friends with him. He also lived in New Mexico. I took the entire educational program through him a second time, because now it had been really built out by Ra. And that was really helpful as well to get all of the up-to-date training. And that was all around 2010. And then I became a teacher with Genoa, and I've been teaching with Human Design America ever since that time period.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
To back up a little bit, for those who don't know, the Uranus opposition is usually somewhere in the early 40s, and it's typically when we often will just say, oh, they're having a midlife crisis, right? Because it's this pivotal time where Uranus is exactly opposite of where it was when we were born. And I can see how that would all play in there. And I really am fascinated by astrology, but I'm not trained in it at all. And so what I know is just what I know from like going down rabbit holes and learning stuff. But I was already just looking at your chart and going, oh, his Pluto's in gate 6, and we're about to have gate 6, another gate 6 transit. And I wonder how those impact, if those gate 6 transits have more impact on you. On, was it Thursday or Friday where the
Yes, we've got a full moon in gate 6, and it's going to be a lunar eclipse on this full moon. And it is, as you said, in gate 6. And we've had a tremendous pileup of planets in Pisces.
To
Now,
clarify, when people are listening to this, I don't mean to cut you off, but this will come out on Monday, so we'll have just had it when the podcast.
okay, yeah.
So people will be looking at it in hindsight, but
Which is always very helpful
Yeah.
with transits. You know, when they're happening, you know, life is happening, and so we're sort of just living life. But it can be very helpful to look back and compare the transits, and that helps us learn these frequencies that the planets bring to our life. So looking in the rearview mirror can be very helpful in that regard. But this one's pretty significant just in general because we've had a lot of planets in the sign of Pisces, and that's where all of the gates of the solar plexus, 6 of the 7 gates are in Pisces. The only gate that's not in Pisces is gate 6, where the eclipse is going to happen, which is in Virgo. But whenever you have a gate activated, we're also thinking about the polarity gate. So 36 is opposite 6. That's where the nodes are. That's why it is an eclipse. And so even though the eclipse is over in Virgo, Pisces is very much part of the story we're in right now.
yeah.
So, but in
And
terms
you
of the
have that 3536 channel you mentioned, the channel of transitoriness, and we've collectively been feeling that channel for a while now, and now it's
Yes.
layering on with these additional energies coming up. And like I find myself on the daily, like not the daily, like a couple times a day, sometimes hourly, going, everything's happening for my greatest expansion. Everything's happening for my, like reminding
Absolutely.
myself because it's so intense right now, right?
I am so happy that you said that because I feel the same way. When I look at transits, and I share this every week on my astrological human design forecast, you know, the universe is choreographed in our behalf, and it's here to support us. And you're right, life experiences can feel chaotic right now. There's reasons for that. But they are here to support us. And so it's never something to be feared. I don't look at Mercury retrogrades and lock my door and stay inside and avoid communication, right? There's a lot of catchphrases in what I call pop astrology that are very disempowering. So I do not fear any transit. I look for inner meaning as a result of the transits. And I really think that's part of what how they can be so supportive for us. And I'll add one thing again, just for our viewers, about why are things so tumultuous right now? And I mean, look at the globe. I mean, there's so much polarization happening. Part of it is that we have the 3 outer planets, Neptune and Uranus and Pluto, are all changing signs within about a 6-month period. And that's pretty unprecedented. I mean, even one outer planet moving signs, we normally would feel it in the collective ripple. But to have 3 of them doing it, it's creating a lot of undercurrent of tension and uncertainty. It brings a lot of change. But what I want to indicate for our human design folks that are a little familiar with the body graph, all 3 of those outer planets have been making those sign changes in individual gates. And so even though out here it can be very noisy and uncertain and a lot of anxiety, the chart is indicating, how are you being empowered right now? What is your truth? I mean, not, you know, as a result of all of this, what's happening inside? And so that kind of ties into your point. The transits are all for that. How am I growing and developing, evolving as a creative, mutative being? And there's plenty of that in the offering right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. And, you know, this week that we're in right now, which will, when people are listening, will be last week, or who knows, could listen to this months in the future. But so I'm recording this, we're recording this on March 11th, just to 2025, to give people perspective. And tomorrow, the sun will be exactly conjunct with Saturn,
Yes.
but it's already in the same gate with gate 22.
Yeah.
And it's been there for a couple of days. And that's another really intense emotional energy. And just looking at your chart, I feel like you are so much kind of almost a representation of everything we're going through, because you also have that hanging gate 22. And I will share a version of your chart on the realhumandesign.com website with the little post when this goes up, so people can visually look at it. But
Yeah.
Just to paint the picture for folks, Richard is an emotional manifesting generator, and the way that his sacral is defined to the throat is through the 59-6 channel, and then he has the 35-36 that then goes up to the throat. So he is defined, you're really an emotional manifesting generator in the fact that that's how it gets there, right? It goes
Yeah.
from the sacral to the solar plexus. And then you also have this hanging gate 22. So I feel like all these energies that we're talking about are really, there in your chart, something you live with on the regular.
Yeah. And we're heading into the 2027 mutation, which is already alive in the field. And so we are all collectively across the globe going through an emotional solar plexus mutation. And so evolving our feelings and emotions and how we live and become aware through that center is really on tap for everyone right now. But you're right, in my chart, it certainly is being hit by a lot of these transits. I've been watching Saturn move, following this very closely. And what I find so interesting about it, Saturn went through gate 22, forward motion, stopped, and went retrograde back through 22. And now we're getting the third pass. And it's in those retrograde phases that we really get the story of development. And Saturn is the planet of structure. It creates our 3D world. It's the planet of limitation. He's kind of the taskmaster, like the teacher in school that was pretty grumpy and you didn't really like him, but they cared. They wanted you to get to learn and to grow. And that's Saturn. He really can provide guardrails that can help get us on our path. So I have tremendous love and appreciation for Saturn. That took some time and experience to develop that. But I really love when he goes through a gate, he brings a possibility of restructuring. And we're talking about our individual emotional expression with others. This is the role of that manifesting individual. So, it's something that's really personal. It's really deep inner core. And so we're all being touched very deeply on, how do I deal with my emotions? How are they working for me? How am I expressing that to my loved ones, to friends, family, to anybody? So we are in a very emotional time from the transits. But again, I think if we look inward, this can help us connect with our sense of truth, our inner authority or personal authority. It's not always inner in each chart. We have a process and with mental projectors and reflectors. But the idea is we all have authority. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we can use these opportunities that can be deeply emotionally stimulating to understand ourselves better. And again, to grow and evolve, which is really what the solar plexus is about. Right. The solar plexus is how we lean into life. Right. The spleen can be very cautious. Why is that safe? I don't know if that's safe. But the solar plexus is like, hey, let's try it. Let's have a new adventure. Let's have a new experience, a new relationship. And so anyway, we're getting a lot of opportunities to learn about how we're dealing with emotions, both personally and collectively.
So that brings me back to your story, because clearly there's a lot of that in your life story. So how do you feel that human design, I mean, I know it gave you the awareness of it, but how do you feel like human design and then the layering in now of astrology has helped you to know how to do that?
Yeah. Great question. So with a defined solar plexus, patience is paramount, right? And again, that wasn't my strong suit. As an MG, boy, we like to get, we're busy. We like to have a lot of plates spinning. And I still am busy. I still do lots of things at one time and those kind of things as an MG. I have a lot of projects in the works right now. But I really do follow my flow, right? I really do. When I first learned about this emotional inner authority, I like a lot of people was like, what? I don't know if I want to wait. Why do I have to be the one that waits, right? Like I was just so fast oriented. But as I did my experiment, right, really observed, took notes, I was really trying this out. And that's what Ra encouraged, right? Try it for yourself. I began to see when I did give myself more time, how much more I became aware of, right? I mean, the story continues to illuminate. The longer I wait, the more I'm aware of and the better decisions for myself I've been able to make. And so I really got to see in real time that jumping the gun, I'm not using all my assets. I'm like playing with half my chips if I'm not giving my body's wisdom time to take it all in, process it. It's kind of like a washing machine. My solar plexus is constantly evaluating my feelings and emotions, and eventually it comes out with awareness. And so I just love that I've been able to relax into that, to appreciate that. It's not a challenge, right? I mean, I coach people up when I'm dealing with life and relationships and business. I let people know, thank you for whatever the offer is. Let me take some time. I'll get back to you. And it's just real natural now. It's not like something I, feel burdened by. I appreciate the gifts of the solar plexus. And for anyone listening that may have had that experience, don't worry about it. Like, give it time. You'll get to see the bounty and the richness. And now people come to me to seek the wisdom that my solar plexus offers. And it can be that way for anyone that has a defined solar plexus. It's a rich source of emotional wisdom available.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I wonder how that is I mean, it's different for everyone, but especially as a man with the conditioning of society to not be emotional. And then looking at your chart, you have a lot of everything is, of course, a binary, or actually it's just like a whole spectrum, right? But I could see how with an undefined will center and your defined gate 48 connecting to the 1858, that there could be a lot of needing to prove yourself and be perfect and fix everything for everyone, especially fixing yourself.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That channel of judgment, that used to be my first foot forward.
Right?
It's very helpful. That is a split definition. It's a projector channel and frequency, but that used to be what I led with, right? My undefined ego was kind of prove myself and I'll show you what's wrong with what, I was just really kind of in that initiating manner, trying to fix the world. And it was not healthy for me, caused me a lot of anxiety. And boy, am I happy to have reorganized my alignment with my mechanics. That channel of judgment's very important in my chart. Not only is it part of my definition, it's also my design, sun, and earth, gate 52 and 58. So it's a very important part of my life, but it's the flow of the mechanical nature. Following my strategy allows me to be in my flow, and through interactions, other people may come along and invite my channel of judgment, an ability to improve things. And I have a great ability to do that when it's in the right place and the right time with the right people. But if I'm up here trying to decide where to insert that, it's tricky ground.
Yeah. So I find it all fascinating because there is this. So my husband has the 1858.
Okay.
And I don't have either of those defined. Hey, just popping in for a quick sec. I know we're deep in conversation, but if you're feeling called to dive deeper into your human design experiment, I'm here to guide you. Whether it's a personalized reading or one-on-one mentorship, let's explore the next steps towards radical self-trust together. Visit kathybochonko.com to learn more. All right, back to the conversation. There's so much more to explore. So my husband has the 1858.
Okay.
And I don't have either of those defined. And it's interesting to watch the dynamic of that channel because we're constantly back and forth. Like me feeling the need to correct him because I feel like he's always correcting me, right? And we had a conversation about it this weekend about the whole tit for tat, right?
Yeah.
That comes out of that, this whole idea of correction and that sort of thing. And then there's that hanging gate 21 is a big theme in my family. We have one daughter, she's 24, and she's living back home again recently. She's a manifester with a defined ego with the hanging gate 21. And she and I both have the 2644 that defines our ego. And then we both have the hanging gate 21. I have all the gates defined on the ego, but that's just the 2644 is the full channel. But he has an undefined ego with a hanging gate 21. And the amount of amplification of control of resources that happens in this family is amazing. So I don't know. That's just where my open head went when you started talking about some of that. And I
Yeah.
just think that that's coming up a lot in this, even though those transits aren't what's going on right now. The transits right now with this gate 22 energy, I really notice are bringing up whatever is the theme in your relationships. And are you giving the other person grace in that situation? So when he starts doing the thing, do I have to do the tit for tat? Do I have to be the one with the last word, the one with the control, the one who, says, but I know you do, I know you are, but what am I? That sort of energy. And it's just very interesting. And I wonder, how that feels to you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, when I think about that channel of judgment, again, it's a design of insatiability. It's this insatiable drive to find joy and to improve sustainability. It's a pattern logic oriented frequency, but it is a collective circuit group, meaning it's for the greater totality. And it's a projector channel, meaning it's help if it's recognized and appreciated before it shares its talents. So for myself, that channel became very self-critical. I've had in my past, and still it happens, a very self-critical voice in my head. That channel of judgment, when it turns inward, it can be very unhealthy, and it can be very unhealthy in a relationship, right? Because we can see things that could be better, but as you're saying, but the other person's has their process. They have their authority. That channel can get really tricky in personal or interrelationship qualities. But recognizing that it needs to be or can be helpful if it's from authority. If someone says, "What do you think about this?" Like I said, I get called in to support and improve things, and that's a really healthy use of that energy. But when it's used on myself or being critical of my partner, it doesn't have a very good frequency in that environment. And as you're saying, like me, I have the undefined gate 21. Again, if I'm invited and I respond with emotional clarity to come in and support with controlling an environment, whether it's being a teacher in a class or being part of a committee, I can be very impactful with my 21 in that environment. However, if it's not in alignment, if it's without emotional clarity, it can be very biting. Gate 21 is called the gate of biting through, right? It can be very overwhelming. So how do I deal with that? Well, I can feel that energy. I know the spectrum of frequency of my 21. And if it's coming from anger, right, ego center, manifesting channel, if I feel anger and control, I can feel this amplification. And for me, it's like a little warning light on the car. It's like, uh-oh, I'm overheating here. Let me take a breath. I know I've done this before. If I come at a person with that 21, when it's over amplified and out of alignment, it's not a real pretty situation. And especially with my 35, 36, I can always speak emotionally, as I always do, even now. It can be overwhelming. So I recognize it now. It's like I just watch, look, listen to my body and follow the signs, right? Follow my authority on how that 21, which is my moon. It's a very powerful activation, but it's on an undefined center. So I know that I want to be standing in my place of authority and emotional clarity, and through response, then all of our gates can be shared in a supportive, healthy way with others.
You speak about all of this very rationally for a person who is so emotionally defined. And I'm wondering if you felt like it's always been that way. Have you always been someone who
No.
no?
No. Pre-human design, I was very bombastic, again, I without these tools or without this specific tool to help me understand myself, I would say there was a lot of finger pointing, channel of judgment. There was a lot of ego put out, pressuring people. Right. I mean, I was confrontational. I was in the special forces. I mean, think about it. I was built to go to war. I mean, I brought.
I'd love if it feels okay. I'd love for you to give us a picture of old Richard versus new Richard, or current Richard.
Yeah. So
I can't even imagine it. It's so much a part of you the way you are now.
Me neither. Yeah. When I look back at that guy who joined the military to go to war, was very had very unhealthy cultural upbringing. There was a lot of judgment. I mean, a lot of things that I look back at that person, I'm like, wow. But I am line 6, and it was a line 3 phase, right? The first 30 years. Yeah, I'd love to talk to that person, but I wouldn't recognize him as me.
What would you say to him?
Oh, I'd say, let's slow down here, kiddo. Let's take a breath here. I mean, I have so much fire energy out there. The gusto was great. I mean, and my enthusiasm, my sense of adventure. I mean, it was unharnessed energy is what it was. And when I met challenges, I lashed out, right? I was very combative. I was very argumentative. I was very, very forceful, right? In all levels, right? So, and it wasn't healthy. I mean, whether it was arguing with partners in relationships or leaving that partner and trying to go out and find another, leaving a job, I was very chaotic, I would say. Just a lot of energy. I have 3 out of 4 motors. Again, that was, we mentioned the solar plexus defined to the throat. I was a bit out of control, is the nice way to say it, I guess. And through
I would think, though, that in some ways, maybe the motor that got you in the most trouble was that undefined one.
Oh, absolutely. Think about that. My only undefined center below the throat is the ego center. So my
whole hanging life, gate 21.
Yeah, with my moon, right? So I have so much life experience tied up into that realm, right? These are classrooms. This is where we get to meet life. And I meet a lot of life in there. And so it really has been my own personal hero's journey to go out and think I could just make anything happen, to meet the slams that took me to the dirt, made me, I went through periods of suicidal tendencies, crisis. And it took that much trauma to finally stop doing that and be like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to integrate, to embody this tool so that I could relax into the wisdom of my body and not be so immature and chaotic about it. And I'd say that was sort of the biggest difference. I was untethered energy that could be very combative, inflammatory, and unhealthy for everyone around in that sense. But it was part of my journey, and so now, I appreciate all that experience. And again, as you're sharing, where I am today is completely different. But I appreciate where I've been. It is my story, and I've learned to appreciate the challenges. Right? I think that's the hard part when we're growing up. Of course, we want things to be perfect. Everybody wants a little bit of perfection. Line 6s can be a little too oriented towards perfection, but we all want to have a great life. And when we don't get it, we don't like it. So how do we deal with that? And again, that's where the process of aligning with our authority can really smooth out the ride, helps us be more aware. That's what I say the transits do as well. The transits are going to be the transits. You don't have to follow the transits to have a great life. You follow your authority, and it doesn't matter what the transits are. But if you have the time and space to observe some of this and learn about it, it does orient us where things are happening to us. So as we're sharing, there's a lot going on in our solar plexus. So regardless of whether someone has it defined or undefined, we are going to school right now in how to deal with our solar plexus. And that extra level of a third-party perspective can really, really support us. It's not, no one's doing this stuff to us personally. These transits are not personal in that sense. They're part of what's going on, and we get to go inward in that sense and discover who we are as a result of them.
I think when I first started exploring human design, some of the language that Ra used about the program kind of reinforced that idea that something was being done to us instead of for us. And so at first I kind of resisted it. There's also a lot of people I've heard in traditional human design circles that talk about that's just mind stuff when you start getting into all of that. But I started to practice, I think I started at full dedication, maybe early October. I think right after the conferences, I came back and I just got really consistent with blogging about the transits. So every 6 days I write a blog.
Yeah, I love yours. I love them. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I've been reading them. They're wonderful. So supportive,
good.
Very empowering. Yeah.
Thank you. You read about my table? That was like it was a silly thing where I realized, where I was like, I'm so focused on my chairs not being here that I'm not grateful for this beautiful table, right? And there was such a metaphor for life that I really saw coming up in this transit energy. And so I really recommend, if anybody is looking for a good contemplative practice, just following them in whatever way. And I just listened the other day to the one you did for this past week. And I find that every one I listen to pulls out, there's so many layers to the insights that we can get when we start looking at, how different things work, even just in human design. But then when you bring in the astrology pieces, and then just finding a person who really resonates with you, and then listening to that, writing about it, whatever, it's been one of the most powerful things I've done.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite things about astrology is it really helps us see our mythology. There is a personal mythological story for each of us. And when I think about human design, that is the mechanical, energetic nature. All right. So human design with astrology is learning how our mechanics interact with the crossroads of our mythology. And this can really, again, support us in how to align. It gives us that sort of reassurance that, hey, there is a mythological story and we can see it in the astrological chart. It's just there. And again, when I met astrology, someone did that for me. I mean, I was down on the ground, ready to give up. And he's like, wait a minute. Look at Chiron in your chart. I had never met Chiron until I met astrology. Chiron doesn't get an activation in the body graph. So this was all new to me at that time. And he was talking about Chiron is opposite 6 of my planets. And I'm like, what does this mean? But I learned about Chiron and it's like, wow, it changed my life. This healer, he was the greatest healer in all of Greek mythology, teacher, educator, philosopher. And I had great resonance with his story and I could see it in my life. And I think a 6 line, everyone that has a 6 in their profile has a very close connection with the chironic frequency, right? Because for 6 lines, we have this tripartite life that is based on the Chiron return at the age of early 50s, 50 to 52. And so anyway, in the early days, I developed this connection and I began to look at it deeper and deeper. And it gave me so much solace and support and help me understand this idea of mythology. Then it became like, okay, there's a whole story and I only know this much of it and there's so much more to come. It really gave me a lot of peace and I love sharing it with others.
Yeah. So your Chiron is gate 17.
Yes, and that's where we have Mercury and Venus are conjunct right now in gate 17, which is a whole nother transit story. But yes, I have Chiron and Aries. I have a whole stellium of planets in Virgo and Libra on the other side. And that Chiron is fairly closely conjunct my moon. So I have Chiron moon conjunction opposite Sun, Jupiter, Mercury, and Pluto. So anyway, Chiron's at a pivotal point at the bottom of my astrological chart. And I really resonated with this story of the wounded healer that we all carry some wounding, whether it be past lives, early childhood development, family of origin, wherever it come from, we all have this sense of insecurity. And Chiron is the story of that for all of us and how we deal with that insecurity. How do we move past it? How do we move forward, even though there is a fear of insecurity? And that is part of the story of Chiron. And for 6 line beings, it's this long tripartite life, right? So I always think when we're looking at a 6 line in a profile, I'm always like, hey, check out Chiron, read about that story, see if you feel a resonance with that planet. We know I bring these frequencies into my awareness. I talk to the planets. I have associations around the boat. I have a little models of planets here. I look at them every night when they're on the sky because we can commune with them just like we can our centers. Everybody has all 9 centers. Spending time going into the body and developing that relationship is very important. I do the same with planets. And so I'm always, like I said, watching them, talking to them, where are they at in my gate and all that. So I got a little down a sidetrack there, but you were talking about Chiron and Aries for me. Yeah. So for me, as a very strong Libra, and I'm very diplomatic. I was not only very aggressive in my past, but I was very much a people pleaser as well, and that's the challenge of the polarity with Aries and Libra right now, which is like, where is my energy? Where is my boundary? Where's the other person's? And how are we dealing with that? right? There's the Aries, which is me, and the Libra, which is us, and there's a tug of war going on there. And how do we find the stability where we can hold both frequencies and stand in the middle of that? And that's been a large part of my life as a result of that.
So this, with this understanding you have of Chiron and astrology and stuff, I'm curious how your Chiron return compared to mine, because I always joke, they say Chiron return is when we come off the roof, right? I didn't even know human design till a few years after that. So I tell people, well, I came off the roof because basically I got pushed off and I fell down the hill, rolled down the hill, laid in the ditch for a few years, finally brushed myself up, stood up, and there came second Saturn return saying, not yet, Missy. We've got more to do with you, right? And
Yeah.
I feel like that second Saturn return for me was really and you're like coming up to that in a few years
Yeah.
still. You're kind
Yes.
of in a different place. And I just have always wondered, everything is the way it's meant to be, right? So, but I've always wondered what it's like for someone who comes into that Chiron return with this greater awareness and understanding of all of this.
Yeah. 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 Great question. Well, one thing I'll say, too, is that life is a never-ending journey of exploration, self-exploration, and growth and development. And so, I think sometimes when people first get into a esoteric knowledge like this, there's this hope that if I do this, everything's going to be perfect. Like life's going to be easy. Got this by the tail. That's just not life. That's not the story.
Right.
That's not how any of the ancient mythologies, any of the stories we find connection to, that's not how it works. Nobody goes to watch a movie where nothing happens in the movie, right? There's going to be a protagonist character. There's going to be a challenge. You're going to get engaged in the movie to see if they can be the hero by the end of it. So that's life. So just to say that, I don't think that it's ever about, oh, I'm there, I've got it. I'm still going through deconditioning after a Saturn return with human design, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, I just always try to encourage everybody that it's about finding presence despite the circumstances. The challenges in life do not go away. How we're able to deal with them and cope with the experience and love ourselves more, that's what we're doing in essence. Now, the part about me coming off the roof, I was in human design for 20 years before that happened. So I was well equipped to be aware of the archetype, what the idea of it is and all that. But I too still, it was a bit of a tumultuous time. I went through I finally left my corporate career because I had been doing corporate America and human design concurrently for 20 years. But I did make some transitions. It was a little bumpy, I would say. But I definitely felt it. When I was looking at my Chiron return for all those years, knowing what I learned from Ra and so forth, I was always like, God, what's it going to be like? Am I going to really feel something? Like, I just was so curious. I can confirm that having gone through it now, I felt it for sure. I felt the inner transition. The way I would describe it is, on the roof for 6 lines, there can be a sense of aloofness, right? We're trying to be withdrawn, and we get a little focused on security and perfection and aloofness. Like we don't want to go down in there and get too caught up in the trial and error. We've been there. We're trying to get away from all that. So for me, my shadow side, I would say, would be I was a little bit of a people pleaser. I was always just trying to keep everybody happy. I would cut a corner, maybe not ever lie, but I might leave something out if it was going to help things along. You know what I'm saying? Coming off the roof, my mantra now is, if I lie, I die. Like, my body can only be authentic 24/7. And that's pretty revolutionary in today's world, right? We're always caught up in some sort of family, tribal, or collective society expectations about how we behave. But for me now, it's like, I am me, unabashed. You get what you get. I'm going to tell the truth, even if it might hurt, okay? Because that's just how this authenticity, it's so deep now. It's just that there's no, I can't cut any corners now. Being off the roof is like, this is it. It's either, I'm it or I'm not it. And if I'm not it, I'm not healthy. So I feel it in my body. And I'd say that's one of the biggest revelations, I'd say, since coming off the roof.
Yeah. I feel like there was such a difference in my life that I feel, but I don't know that I mean, I still live in the same place, but I live in a completely different place here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, yeah, but it's like, I don't know. And I'm wondering if you relate to this. I feel like part of coming off the roof is to say, oh, what were the parts of me that I left behind when I went on the roof?
absolutely.
And I'm wondering
100%, Kathy.
for you, was that the adventurer? Was that a little
It
bit
is.
of the playing it safe?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. That's how I would, we're right on feeling the same way about this. It's like
Mhm.
I left behind things that I loved back in that first third, being the adventurer. I owned an adventure travel company. I backpacked around the world for years. I was fearless. Well, when I went onto the roof, I wasn't fearless. I was very security oriented. That was the corporate side of me. That was like have mortgages, have this type of stuff. And I lost a lot of that sense of adventure. I have channel of exploration, the 3410, right? I mean, that's an individual mutative quality where adventure fits into that mold. And so, yeah, what I'm feeling now is a synthesis of the first third and the second third in a new mutation where they come together, the full expression. Yeah. And that's where I am now. I'm like, okay, well, I've always wanted to live on a sailboat and travel the world. So here we go. So I feel parts of my adventurism coming back of that trial and error line 3 phase, but in a healthier way, a much more
Yeah.
mature way. It's not so just, yeah, it's not as crazy as I may have been before. It feels very natural and aligned and healthy, I would say, of this synthesis of those first 2 stages.
Yeah. And for me, I went on the roof right around the time when I married my husband. And so I left a lot of these things behind, these parts of me, as part of settling down, right? And
Yeah.
then our daughter grew up to where, and then I decided to leave the job. It wasn't a corporate job, but I worked in retail fashion, and I decided to leave that behind. I started to do all these different things. And when I would have these conversations with my husband about all the things I gave up, and he would always be like, I never asked you to do that. I never asked, and I knew that, but it was like society and just my own mind and this idea of what it meant to be a good wife and mother and what it was like, because we moved in the process. So I left. I was a city girl. I loved Chicago. We moved out to North Georgia, all these things. And so then to find this way of not blaming anyone for any of this, taking responsibility for reclaiming those parts of myself, right?
Yes.
Without, and not letting that, not doing it in a way that was like beating him over the head with it, right? Like I'm gonna, but yet still having that autonomy. It's been a real interesting dynamic, and I have spent a lot of these transits with the relationship stuff, realizing how easy it is to think that I should just go do the thing that I want to do. But everything about my design is about doing it in relationship, right? And so I realize how much harder that is, right?
Yeah.
And but also how much more rewarding it is. So, and
Absolutely.
my Chiron's gate 37.
All
So
right. All
gate of
right.
the gate of the family, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's beautiful, everything you shared there. And I love that you're speaking towards it in this integration, right? It's
Right.
it's remembering who we are, how we integrate that personally and live our truth as best we understand ourselves. But then the next step is how do we have that, what Brandy and I call 9-centered relating, right?
Right.
How do we get to follow our authority, our body's wisdom every minute of every day and still be in a relationship with another person who also has their authority?
Right.
And this is where we are in our world right now. We're still learning how to do that as we go through the mutation in the solar plexus. So it's fascinating work. And so I appreciate you bringing this to the public with your stories with your husband and family. And Brandy and I do the same thing. Like we're evolving in real time. How do 2 people do anything they want at all times and still be in a relationship? It's quite a concept.
Yeah. And there's this idea that, oh, it's just easier to be it's just easier to be single, right? So people just think it's too hard and they quit.
Yeah,
And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just,
you're right.
my sister and I just were having a little messenger conversation about people's health and why it's true that women are healthier when they're single, but men are healthier in relationship. And I think that that speaks to the balance where women lose themselves when they go in relationships. So, how can I, as a six line role model, show people how to be myself and stay in a relationship and not have to be alone? Because there's something beautiful that happens in a relationship. And how can I continue, can I encourage my husband to be supportive of himself in the relationship, not me do it, which he's very independent. We're both very independent people, which is not always easy either, but so
This is such a, I think, profound and beautiful topic, right? And it probably it's more than we have time to get
yeah.
super deep. But I appreciate you bringing this to your podcast and your viewers, because this is the crux, right? It's like, who am I and how do I exist in a relationship, right? And it can be tricky ground. And when we think about love as a frequency, we know that the way these frequencies work, love and hate are the same chord. It's different ends of the frequency. And so when we have loving relationships, we also can know that it's only people that we love that can actually trigger our emotional wounds from our past, right? So it's an interesting dynamic how it works in itself. If we're going to actually fall in love with another person, by definition, we're going to be stimulated in a very painful way as well. And so they are incredible containers of healing individually as well as together in relationship. And again, this is a lot of the work that Brandy and I are doing. And yeah, it's like, it's not like easy, or it's not always easy, but the rewards are profound and they're deep. And this is what, again, we call nine-centered relating, how to live your truth, communicate effectively enough with your beloved so that you're supporting each other, yet giving the autonomy to each other as well to be who you are. I mean, that's all this work is about, is who am I and how do I express that with the deepest sense of authenticity, and being able to do that in relationship. You can't get it alone necessarily. It's like, it's not that it's one's better than the other, but whether we're in or out of relationship, we're all moving through the spectrum of how do I exist in love with myself and in love with the other. And it's a beautiful journey.
This is also a great segue into our next episode we're going to record with you and Brandy, where we can really get into some of this stuff. So this feels like it really naturally went that direction. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We are too. Yeah.
Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about, there was something I was listening to that video, a video of yours, and you talked about something called the magnificence profile.
Yeah.
Can you does that feel like something you want to touch on, what that is?
Sure. Well, I'd love to touch on it because Brandy and I are offering our next course called Awaken. It's part of our OM program, Awaken, Unfold, and Mastery. And Awaken is the first course of that program. And it's an awakening to our magnificence. That's what we're going to be teaching. And, essentially, when we look at our body graph, we're learning about the gifts, innate gifts, talents, resources that we're born with, and learn to evolve with experience on how that expression will eventually manifest itself. And so the magnificence profile is being able to see the magnificence in our chart and relate that through a deep physical connection with the magnificence in our body. So we call it the magnificence profile because everybody has one, but we've gotten so sometimes beat down by challenges of life, by self-limiting concepts, our chironic wounds, our family of origins, wherever it comes from. We all are have this sensation that, am I enough? Am I really enough? And to think about me being magnificent, not always easy, but it is. When we have the support and the tools that we have, we share how to express our own unique magnificence profile.
So this Awaken, this is a group program you're starting, or?
Yeah, it's a 9-week online course offered on our webpage, emergebydesign.net. And if anyone would like to read more about it, they can just go to our webpage, and there's plenty of information about it. And it will really, we're going down to the core, again, using human design and the astrology chart to see how the mechanics meet the mythology. We can uncover the hidden gems of our magnificence. And that's what we'll be teaching in this online course.
I love that. I love the whole idea of exploring the mythology more. I just kind of geek out on stuff like that. I did a thing with I like to play with Chat GPT. I don't know if
Oh,
you
me
ever use
too.
it though. And there
Yeah.
was I saw that they had a bot, they have all these different bots, and one was explore mythological creatures or something. And so I basically gave it all the information of the nuances of my chart that I had from something else I'd written.
Yeah.
And then I said, create a story of a mythological creature with this. And the mythology of it was just so exciting. I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. See,
Right.
and it stimulates creativity, right? We can connect to creativity. And I always say that creativity is the kryptonite to fear, doubt, and insecurity.
Oh, that's
And so
beautiful.
just the exercise you did where you were saying, let's see what's possible. This is where and feeling creative is not normal for everybody. And I can say from my past experience, I never felt creative. I didn't paint or sing or draw, or I didn't have an art form of creativity, but I have discovered my creativity, and it's very adventurous. I'm Sagittarius rising. I love travel. I'm on a boat in a foreign country. I got and my mythology is caught up in that. I love philosophies. Human design, right? So I really connect with the centaur, which is Chiron. Chiron is the image of the centaur in the astrological sign of Sagittarius, and that's a deep part of my mythology. And that has stimulated my creativity. And creativity, it is such a beautiful inner resource that every person has, whether or not, no matter what's in our chart, we have the opportunity to connect with our sense of creativity that is so inspiring for our life.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I really want to thank you for sharing all this with us. And your wisdom and just joy is contagious. And I really have enjoyed chatting. And I want to thank you. And I'm looking forward to continuing this with our third part. And meanwhile, if anyone's listening to that and you haven't listened to Brandy's story, go back 2 episodes and listen to Brandy Jordan. And then we'll have the new one out in a couple weeks. So
Yeah, Kathy, we can't wait to join you as well together. And just want to thank you for this podcast. Again, being involved with human design so long ago when there was no communities, there was no support groups. These are invaluable for all of us to listen, to connect, to hear these different stories. Really, as we lock arms together on this journey of self-discovery, really valuable. So thank you very much for your time and efforts for what you do.
you are most welcome, and thank you. So peace out. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Real Human Design Stories. I hope these stories help you see how human design can reframe not only your own story, but also the stories you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to tell a more empowered story about who you came here to be, I invite you to explore ways to work with me directly at kathybochonko.com. Supporting this podcast is easy. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, like, comment, and share with your friends. This helps the podcast grow the most. You can also become a contributing sponsor for as little as 99 cents a month. Details are available at realhumandesignstories.com. Thanks again for being here. Real Human Design Stories is created and hosted by me, Kathy Bochonko, and produced by Number 3 Productions. Peace out, everybody.